This is about the Course of Miracles for beginners. Um, and so organically, me, Travis Ann, and Richard started a Course of Miracles group. I was thinking about this morning, how this happened. And I guess it's because I started saying that I was going to start studying the Course of Miracles. And then both of y'all just happened to be like, hey, I bought the book.
I'm
Correct?
surprised we waited this long to kind of figure out this is something that we wanted to do.
Mhm. Yeah. And so
Same. I remember when I first met you, you talked about A Course in Miracles and about how you were going to do it. And you had even sent me a link to it. Um, and I went to the link and then I just never did it, but it just stayed with me. Like, one day I'm going to do A Course in Miracles. And then when you said, okay, I'm doing it, I said, okay, well, I guess I am too. Here we go.
it's funny because on my script, or one of the questions that I do at the beginning of the year is, what would I regret not doing this year? And I put not doing the Course of Miracles. And I think at the beginning of the year, I tried to kind of start it up again and then like fell off until shit hit the fan. And I was like, okay, what am I missing? And I just got an overwhelming pool of like, I'm missing the Course of Miracles. So go do it. Right. And so luckily, y'all did it with me organically. And then we just started this group. So I'm going to start off with the first question. And so, can you share any personal experiences or insights that have deepened your understanding and application of the course?
So I go first, right?
You go first, Richard.
All right. So when I first started learning about how the ego plays in your mind, my first experience was I drive to work every day for an hour there, hour back. So the road was a very clear contrast for me to see that my mind loves to play out all these scenarios or these stories. And, from that can be road rage or just any kind of discomfort when you're on the road dealing with others. So for me, identifying these stories, starting to understand what's going on in the mind, definitely allowed me to be a little more calm about situations, a little more accepting the situations, and ultimately allowing you to understand situations better, or just being having peace with it, no matter what it is, really, because you don't know what's going on in other people's minds if it not that it matters, right? So for me, it's like I definitely feel a little bit more calm, and that I can have a little more self-empowerment when it comes to taking on these struggles.
Hmm. And what about you, Travis?
So for me, there was a lesson in the beginning that uh, said something along the lines of like, our thoughts are not our own. And so that day, that was the lesson. And that night, I'm in the kitchen and I'm cooking and I'm thinking to myself something along the lines of, like, oh, I'm cooking again, like, kind of like not into the concept, right? And then I kind of start this story of how, like, I'm cooking, nobody's helping me. And then I catch myself in the thought and in that story and forgive it. Forgive me for doing it and forgiving the imaginary story of that I was doing anything alone or whatever. And then a few seconds later, my husband says, "You need any help?" So I felt like it was like the lesson of like, your thoughts are not your own, and in forgiveness and in like a manifestation, like all in like a 30-second time period.
Oh yeah, I love that story. Like just kind of like what Richard was saying, it's kind of the noticing of the stories. I think the one story that comes to mind for me is there was a chaos moment between me and my son, and I was kind of appalled by stuff that was being said. And this is dramatic, but I may have told y'all this. I stood out in the rain and stood there and looked at what was being said and saw it as a reflection of something along the same lines, on the same pattern that I still felt guilty for. And so it was that reverse of like, oh, this is me. This is me just being reflected and it's just unconscious. And so what I have to do is forgive it. And because that's why it's there. It's not actually, there's nobody there. It's just a projection of what's inside of me. And so it helped me soften it up. If I constantly am working that whole angle that they're not there, which this might be advanced for some of the new beginners, of the Course of Miracles, but that's what it's just everything's unconscious here and it gets projected out there. So nobody's actually doing anything to me at all. And so it helps me stay out of that victim, helps me stay out of the victim role. We're still working on it, right? um, so what do you have? What kind of question do you have, Richard? You'd be next.
Okay, all right. I had something similar in the beginning now. Like, what have you gotten out of it so far? Like, what do you feel like is something that you've gained, or like a tool, like a mental tool that you've gained that you're using in the moment that you've learned from the course? I don't know how similar that is. Are you using anything that you learned from the course to kind of break away from situations, or or look at a situation differently so that you're not having the same reaction?
Do you want to go first, Travis Ann?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, go for it.
So one of the one of my superpowers and vices is a really talented ability to disassociate. And so, any unpreferred scenario, I can disassociate even without realizing I've dissociated.
Mhm.
And I would say A Course in Miracles has given me a different, almost activity to do rather than just straight dissociation. It's given me a little bit more of a mental exercise, a thought exercise of every time I'm confronted or met with something unpreferred, it's an opportunity for me to practice again, rather than just leave my body entirely and be in outer space.
Well,
Right,
that's
right, right.
interesting. So like so for example, so if you're in a situation and there's something that like triggers or you're unpreferred or it just kind of rattles you, how do you disassociate? Like what do? You just kind of like go off into La La Land?
More or less, like what's happening in my mind is usually more entertaining than whatever unpleasantness I'm experiencing in life.
Mm.
So I can disassociate and go to some creative place and make something in my mind that I've been working on. Or I can start to imagine something I want to create in an art manifestation, like actually painting something. I could start imagining it. Or, I mean, in my disassociation, I can create an entire business and sell the business and have customer. Like, I mean, I can just do anything disassociated.
And so this keeps you, so the technique that you got from the Course of Miracles or a technique that you use, it keeps you in it to kind of dissolve it versus like going off where I'm like not even part of this world right now. Oh, okay. I like that.
If it's trying to stay in the state, right, instead of falling out.
Mhm.
Interesting. Interesting. So for me, yeah, I mean, I think I've been using that turnaround method for a while, except for like I knew it was a part of me, but this was a big miss of me, is I continue to do this mental masturbation and not forgiving it. Like I would be like, oh, this is something that's in me that I don't like. And I think I just I couldn't, I couldn't transmute it. I would just sit there and continue to go, oh, this is something that I don't like. Well, where do I do that? Okay, well, I think the Course of Miracles gave me a process to start forgiving that in myself and giving me the words to start forgiving it in myself. I think really what really like made sense to me is like, you always hear this world is an illusion. And I knew that there was like this fluid illusion, but like there was a like, oh, wait, it's really an illusion. And so I think the understanding of what the Course of Miracles is saying about it being an illusion and not being there, it really like cemented it in, which, you have to be normal. You can't go around and tell everybody like, hey, you're dreaming, they're going to think you're crazy. We'd all be in a, mental because what I think the Course of Miracles does, and I was listening to a seminar on it that was like, you still have to be a normal person, right? In the world that's an illusion. So you still have to like you have to have exercises to be able to go, okay, it is an illusion, but I live in it. So I want to dissolve these things in the illusion that I live in. And so yeah, I think that the forgiveness and really understanding that, yeah, it's really just light underneath all of it, you know? And so that backstory was big for me. big time, because I wasn't quite understanding. I've heard this in the Course of Miracles. The people that go to the Course of Miracles and study it are the people that think to themselves, there must be a better way. And I feel like I had that years ago when my first awakening. I mean, I wasn't aware of that, right? But I just remember being like, there has to be something else going on here that I'm not getting. And I feel like once you get to that point that you're like, and I think the Course of Miracles actually is for the people that are frustrated the most. They're like, what the F is going on here? And so then slowly it could be presented to you. I had it sent to me. I didn't know if I ever told y'all that story. I had it sent to me by my mother. I wasn't talking to her for years, and all of a sudden I got the Course of Miracles sent to me in the mail, and I remember with nobody, that it didn't say who sent it to me, but I opened it up and I was like, what is this? And I Googled it and it said it was some kind of religious text is what I remember doing that. And I was like, this is from my mom, I just know it. And I went back to, I figured out where she got it from, and I went back to Barnes and Noble and returned it and got a daily planner. That is a true story. Because when I started talking to my mom again, she asked me about it, and I was like, no, I returned it. She was like, what? But I didn't know what it was. I was just like, here's another religious thing that my mom's sending me. So yeah, you have to really be ready for it, right? I wasn't there.
When your ears are ready, you can hear.
Yeah, I wasn't even dipping my toe in it at that point. Like I hadn't even resolved anything with my mom in my head. So it was like, that wasn't going to do anything for me, but it was showing up. Okay, so I'm going to go on to your question, Travis Ann, unless anybody else has anything to say.
No, I'm good.
Did Richard answer?
Oh, wait.
Oh, yeah.
My own question. Can I
Yeah.
answer my own question?
Yes.
So what the tool that I feel like I use the most now, that I feel like I've gotten out of the A Course in Miracles the most, is like the understanding for me that or the ability to give grace to others for their own beliefs, you know. So for a long time I would just call it ego backlash, you know, and using you know different truths or whatever I believe is almost like like a you know like a whip almost, you know, like if you don't believe this, then hell you. But so now I just feel like the course has given me like this knowing that people are really just hurting and not just, you know, I can look at them as hurting instead of as being a victim now, a lot more than I used to. So that alone, as long as I keep resorting to that, staying in the moment, and being in the present. Oh, that's such a huge one too. Like I've learned so much more about just being in the present. Like I really didn't have a full understanding about that before, you know, like allowing the past thoughts to get in there, and even expressing yourself in certain ways, and unknowingly making assertions from the past or future, you know. So that's my biggest tool I feel like I use now. So when I feel like I'm in those situations, I try to stay in the present and just kind of remind myself that this is how it's going to play out the best if I just stay in this. So instead of, you know, falling back into that victim mentality, just know no matter what's going on that I must face it with love if I really want the preferred outcome.
Mm.
So.
I feel that. I say it's funny to me because I was in, retreat this week, and the one thing that I pulled away from the woo-woo people, which would include myself, is everybody goes, like there's a lot of I don't know if you ever noticed that. Like it's these, and I'm like, oh my God.
That sounds like a delicious thought to me.
Okay, so Travis Ann, what's your question? What's your next question?
How would you describe A Course in Miracles to a 5-year-old?
Good question. You want to go, or do you want me to go?
I'll go ahead if you can.
Okay, so how would it describe the Course of Miracles to a 5-year-old would be that, like if I was telling a story in a storybook, I would say that there was only love first. It was just love first. And that love essence had a crazy idea that it could be separate from itself. And that crazy idea had so much energy, it exploded into physical reality. And so there was like almost like a void, I would say, just light. Like I see pages of just white and light and sparkle. And then I see like a one mad idea coming up going, maybe I can be separate. And in that instant, it boom onto the pages. you just see this burst of like energy and cosmic physical reality, because that would make you separate from what the light of God was. And then that's what starts to turn into what we are today, why we think we're separate from God. But it's all just an illusion. It never, like, it's not ever really happened. It's just painted on top of the actual, like, I have this like vision of like there's the light, the physical reality, but behind it, it's still the light. So it's just it's almost like translucent of this physical reality. And so really it never really happened. You're still just the light. But that crazy little thought made us like forget all of that. We thought we could, like, that thought it could be better than God. I can do it better than you. Look. And so there's this unconscious part of all of us that doesn't understand that and feels really guilty about us ever wanting to separate from the love. And so that's why we have the world that we have today of egos, because it's the ego thought to me, thinking it could be separate, and we're just continuously just fighting each other. It's that's the way I think of it in a storybook of like explaining what is going on here. Because I mean, I've said this many times before, like I'm surprised, and maybe I'm just telling myself a story, but I mean, I'm not surprised because I know how the mind works more. But like I don't feel like that's like center of conversation is like, what are we doing? Like, let's look around, like, what's going on? Like, we're sitting in this crazy ass little reality. Why is this? And I guess maybe because science tries to prove it, but still it wasn't enough for me. I'm like, this is weird that we're not talking about this. How is this not?
I think we do start talking about it like when we're around 4 years old and we start asking everyone why. And everyone starts giving us their version of what the answer is. And so we form this hodgepodge answer for ourselves based on whatever we're experiencing from other people when we ask why, and they say just because or whatever.
True. And then also as a 4-year-old, like, because with raising my son, when you keep it real simple, like they're just like, okay. So like if somebody tells you something, we're like, okay, that's what it is, until you start like, really getting some self-awareness as you get older. You're like, well, what's going on here? Like, yeah, let me question this a little bit deeper. And that's why I think when you get to the course, it's when you're like, okay, there has to be more to this. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What about
Yeah,
you? How would you explain it, Richard?
I think I would call you and have you explain my kids. She has good visuals, so you'll like it. I mean, my first thought was like, all right, like this is a manual for the mind, right? And how do I give a 5-year-old, a definition of this book as far as like this is being a manual for the mind? So I guess I would probably just start out as like if you have issues in your life, this will help you solve them. If you have questions in your life, this will help you solve them. Just go down the list of all the different things that we have problems with. And it's all in here. It'll all tell you how to solve the problems yourself. You don't have to go outside yourself. You don't have to search for it. It's all right here. And once you learn it, you have it forever. So, I mean, I would start out with something like that, just as far as just solidifying the fact that this thing is going to help you if you allow it to. And, he's 5, so he's not gonna be able to read it. We struggle to read this thing. So explaining it to like a 5-year-old, that's a great question. But maybe once in a while, I try to slide in a little truth, that I've learned from like a course or something like, just like I got my kids to at least acknowledge like, what is God? And they'll be like, it's everything. So I've gotten in little tiny truths here and there. So like maybe somewhere down the road, those will be their core beliefs, and it won't be so difficult to allow the other ones in on it, because they all align. So you just want to keep out the bad ones and just make sure that their beliefs somewhat align with it.
Mm.
So, but I like the visuals, and it reminds me like when I first, I had an awakening back in 2016, and right after that, I had this idea. I still have it somewhere. Like I bought this binder of blank pages, and me and Audrey were gonna like kind of create a book, and it kind of sounded like what Jacqueline was kind of going after there. So like there's like 3 pages in there where we like drew something, and we were gonna put a narration to it, but we were gonna like create like a little book, and it sounded like it was gonna kind of align with the Course of Miracles, like how things start and how things are playing out, what true reality should look like versus how we're playing it out now. So that was interesting that you said that.
Yeah. I'm a visual person, so like whenever I'm hearing stuff from the course, it's like I'm trying to like put it on a movie screen in my mind. Um, I'm gonna go into the next question. Hold on.
Should
How
I answer?
Yeah, oh, did you not answer? Yeah, yeah, go for it, girl. Tell me how you explain it.
Uh, um, okay, so I would describe that this book is a thought teaches a thought system for how to see reality for what it is, and that it teaches that everything that we experience in this life feels really real, but it's just a dream or like a movie, and we're just watching it. And the book teaches you how to think so that you can participate rather than only be a viewer.
I like that.
Nice.
In my mind,
Write that down.
right, in my mind, I saw like an adult and a child sitting in a movie theater watching the screen of life, right? And watching it and observing it and like learning how to see it with grace, love, and forgiveness. Because that dissolves the ego mind is when we can, be led with the grace and the forgiveness and the love. And so that's what was coming up of like, a child and her son, obviously. And we're watching the movie and to learn to just watch it, and not necessarily put so many meaning onto it. So yeah, I like that. I like that we could like somehow put all of those like concepts together, right? Because it
Mhm.
really is for me, not that there's not other teaching out there, but I think that the Course of Miracles um is not easy to read, but the workbook is easier, and I think it helps you really integrate that in on a daily basis. It's like it's interesting. Well, it's interesting that it came from a I think she's psychiatrist, or I think she was a psychologist or something like that. Um, and it makes sense because she's really put it in like a teaching, so you could do it day to day. And it sounds like a poem when you read it. That's why I think it's very hard to understand because it's kind of poetic. Okay, so my question is, how do you approach the concept of forgiveness in relation to the Course of Miracles? So, do you want to go first, Richard? Well, we'll just go around. Okay.
So say it again.
Okay. How do you approach the concept of forgiveness in relation to the Course of Miracles?
Well, if I'm in a situation where I feel like I need to forgive something, I do feel like now that I've learned some in the course that I am also responsible for the feeling. The energy is my energy. It's been triggered, so there's something in me. It's not so much outside of me that I'm looking for the. So I've kind of come to the conclusion that I really no longer looking for the apologies, even though I want them at times. I shouldn't really be looking for the apologies outside of me. I should be looking for the truth within and for the peace for that. So every time I do feel like I'm in those negative situations, if I'm aware, I do sit back, try to pause and just accept that, this is what is in this for me? Because right now I'm not seeing it. So you definitely have to, and I feel like those opportunities are there. You're like in this PowerPoint where if you set back, you don't react, you can give yourself the chance to to react authentically. So just acknowledging that you're in that state of feeling this negative emotion, acknowledge it, forgive it, and then sometime later just try to figure out what it is that you're relying on to believe in order to see that way. That way, because ultimately I think the openness is there to accept new beliefs. When you have a negative belief that that has a reflection of has a negative reflection, we should be just acknowledging the fact that we should be looking for a positive one so that our mind's not always going to resort to that negative one. So we're just trying to re-choose our lenses, our beliefs that we perceive with, but you have to be open and at least counteractive, productive, trying to at least tackle these issues. So just being aware and trying to tackle these issues. That's how for me, that's how I think how I process forgiveness at the moment.
I like that. What about you, Travis Sam? Do you want me to
So
read
I'm
it?
I'm experiencing it similarly in
Okay.
that I experience forgiveness now as the ultimate act of now,
Yeah.
meaning that I can sit in the present moment and not experience any thought or physical effect of what has happened with that situation in the past, and I can sit in the now and not anticipate what could happen based on my experience. So the forgiveness is the to me is like a collapsing of um and a creation of neutrality in the now moment so that you might experience the full potentiality of what reality could be. In that, in any moment, if we're creating a thought system or holding in our physical form any amount of lack of forgiveness, then we're limiting the possibility through limiting beliefs of what we can experience in this reality.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. I like
Yeah.
that.
Um, so my answer, how do I approach the concept of forgiveness and relating to the Course of Miracles? Well, it kind of just goes back to that if I'm judging anything out there, it's because I need to forgive it. Um, and I need to forgive it in myself. So that's how I approach it, that it's just not out there. It's in me. And I've seen over the years, before even doing the Course of Miracles, I've seen over the years how things that would have triggered me in the past do not trigger me like they did. Or I just don't give, I mean, I've seen it in a matter of days, actually, where it's like the same thing happens. And then I'm just like, it's just not that big of a deal. Um, because I guess that's where the real integration has come in. And I've spoken about this example before, and it goes with kind of the story I was saying before. There was something said, and it bothered me intensely one day. And I was like, okay, I just got to forgive this. I got to forgive this. I've done similar things. I've acted in similar, and I've said similar things as well. And then the next day, the same thing was said again. And it was just like, oh, it was literally like, I remember going, one day I was appalled, and the next day I was just like, oh, okay, it's like, this doesn't even bother me. It's just words. So for me, that was an indication of me like actually forgiving myself. Like I actually forgave myself because the next day it didn't bother me. Now, I don't know if it was said again by somebody else, because sometimes maybe that, and then it will be like, it just doesn't, it feels inside a little bit different. It feels smaller and smaller and smaller. And so that's what I was told that the course does. It gives you one thing, it will give you more peace. I'm like all about peace. Let's do that. I want to embody that. And so I think that that's what it has created for me, definitely. Um, what's your next question, Richard?
Um, it's a very popular question everybody likes to ask. How would you describe the ego?
Mm.
I've heard it a million times. Does the Course of Miracles make it different for you? Do you still have the same definition of it? Since
Do you want to go first? Because I just talked.
So I'm sure that my definition of the ego has evolved. I would say I've been on a path to see the ego with loving eyes, and that the loving eyes that I see the ego with have only gotten more loving. I see the ego as having a role in this experience to give us an obstacle to crawl over to wake up, essentially. In this physical reality, the role that the ego is playing is to keep us safe. And the whole idea that we need to be kept safe in and of itself is the illusion. So I think even more so, I'm seeing the ego through those loving eyes of it just trying to keep me physically safe. And anytime that the ego is coming up, it's an opportunity for me to remind myself, remember in my mind, my small in mind, that this is all an illusion. So it's to me, it's put there for an opportunity to wake up.
Yeah.
You want me to answer my own question? You want to go?
I'll go. And then you can answer your own question. So the ego concept to me is, well, I think of it as like a computer program for sure. And I agree with it's keeping me safe, which so could keep me in the familiar, even though I might not prefer it. So I definitely think that it's a program that's just running. And for me, what's helped me the best is kind of not identifying that I am that program. So, and the ego to me is negatively oriented. So even though it's keeping me safe, it's looking for the danger. It's always looking for the negative, and it's going to point it out. And so I can just notice the program going off, and there it goes again, right? And so, and then try to listen for the opposite, the angel on my shoulder, and be directed by this instead of the ego program that has just been repeated over and over in my life. So that's how I kind of has always helped me, is to like, okay, the ego is a negative program trying to keep me safe, but is keeps me safe in the familiar that isn't always what I want to do. I think I can, younger me thought I was the ego. And I think that's kind of the thing that kind of most people think they are their voice in their head. And they're not separating themselves from that voice. They think that is them. And so I would prefer to not think that I am that negative voice in my head, because it's talking shit a lot. And so it's just a program that's been running. So that's what's really helped me the most. And I think that it's possible with the Course of Miracles to completely dissolve that ego. Now, I don't know if I'll be reaching it in this lifetime, but I do believe that that's what enlightenment is dissolving that ego completely, so that you're not being led by it or hearing it at all. I've heard too from the Course different studies that I've listened to about that the ego speaks first. So I'm always trying to kind of gauge that, because I heard recently that it said like, you ask a question to God and then the ego speaks first and then you think it's God. And so you're doing what it says to do. And they even said something like the ego can be very, very sweet and persuasive. And I think sometimes too, it can be like, oh, I'm just keeping you safe. And so it's interesting to always kind of be looking at it from an outsider. And the ego will have you playing a certain character too. So I'm always like, here, that's how I like see myself. I'm always here, like watching it, like through the theater of seeing what it's gonna act like today. So that's kind of how I describe the ego. What do you think, Richard?
Um, well, before Course of Miracles, I kind of just thought it was just negative, kill it kind of thing, which is mostly true, I guess. But I kind of see it as two different parts. I kind of see that I feel like I see a positive side of the ego at times. Even though it's still reacting to the illusion, it's in a positive thing, like getting somebody, like maybe I've used this example before, giving somebody flowers to try to make them happy. I don't know how much of that is just ego.
Yeah,
Uh,
I see that, because then you're like, I'm giving them flowers to make them happy, so they'll see me a certain way. So it kind of like can be the ego, because but it's still giving love to somebody else too. So yeah,
yeah,
that's a
so
fine
I
line.
feel like incorporating love into the ego would do something like that, perhaps, But when it comes to like, well, so since the Course of Miracles, I do have a more of a, I do feel like I've structured the understanding a little differently for me. Like the two minds are separate. Like the ego mind is completely separate. Like I am the wall between the ego mind and the little m mind,
Mhm.
and they don't even communicate with each other. So that was really not a realization of mine. So like it is hard to tell which one you're getting information from. Um, but there was like this little I forget, there was this little thing I got from, if it feels authentic or if it feels fear based, it's probably the ego. So if you're paying attention, if you're discerning the answers you're getting, then maybe you can figure out which one it's from. Um, but like the ego, it's like the ego's down in the valley, doesn't know what's happening. It's just down in the trenches, trying to survive. And then the little M mind is on the top of the mountain, trying to guide us the entire time. So I guess it's just trying to understand that when the mind's playing out negative things, that you do have a choice to listen to something else if you can hear it. I'm always struggling to hear that voice.
Mm-hmm.
But and then um it's the little M's always trying to give you, it's always trying to put you on your path. So if you allow it, if you're not always in your own way and you allow this communication to come through and you can discern it and not allow the ego to, bombard you with the messages, and then you can stay on your path. So I feel like, the ego is just like, it's trying to help you, but it just doesn't know that it's helping you. So so I guess it depends on what state you're in. You could really believe it's helping you if you're in the victim state, but we're truly not. So it's just trying to fight off that illusion and trying to convince the ego that it's just an illusion. We have everything we need, all the time.
I've heard once somebody say, of course, they didn't say it was their ego. They talked about it being like anxiety, which I would put in ego. And they said, I think my anxiety like helps me because it has me doing stuff to keep me safe. Like they have the catastrophic thinking that something bad is going to happen. So they're doubling and tripling, checking if, something's locked up or, the stove's off. And they're like, well, it keeps me safe. It has me. And I'm like, but it's keeping you anxious, like, okay, you've checked it once. So it's
They're probably
good.
missing the other signs and symbols of how to change that path too, because they're worried.
Exactly. So it was like, it's funny that they were convinced that the ego was good for them. The anxiety that I have that tortures me is actually really good for me because it keeps me safe. And I was like, oh, that sounds like another ego thing. It's good that you're being anxious all the time because it's going to keep you safe from, the whole world blowing up, because you're locking all the doors. And I've also heard the ego feels retractive. So if you're like in your body and it feels retractive, then that's ego talking. If it feels expansive, that's your like connection or your higher self or whatever you want to label that, which helps me a lot because I'll ask myself, wait, do I feel anxious right now? Or does this feel good? And when something's like flowing and you're excited, that difference. So it helps you to kind of know which one you're going to be or which one you're in that moment, and then being led in whatever direction you choose. Yeah.
One thing that was coming up for me was this concept that the ego will always be in search of controlling the outcome, and that your intuition or your higher self will always be in search of the experience.
I like that.
Right.
No matter what's happening, it's just experiencing it, right? It doesn't matter. It
Right.
doesn't label it. It
We
is
are consciousness trying to experience itself.
okay.
So if it's your higher self, it will put you on the path to experience, and experience will be the motivation. But if it's your ego, the ego will try to force an outcome.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I agree big time. And the ego likes to move that goalpost too. You can get there and it'll be like, wait. It's that carrot that keeps moving. Yeah, it does that a lot. And then you got to just like recognize it. I think the course just gives you more awareness over. I mean, I feel like all of us had awareness, but I think what the course does, because it's a daily practice of different things, it really like that. It's that integration, man.
Yeah, integration.
Integration of love. Done. Right.
Like I've used this example with Jacqueline before. Like when I first had like an awareness, I felt like I went to school to learn music theory, and I learned all the music theory, and then I'm like, I can play anything, right? And then I pick up an instrument, I can't play a single note because I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to express myself with this instrument. I have the knowledge, but not the no ability to express it. It was kind of I felt.
No, I like that. You have the knowledge, but not the practice. So,
Yes, I need to integrate the knowledge into this instrument of myself.
mhm. And I think this just came, this organic group that we created has helped us all keep accountable. And especially like we experienced yesterday, like we're all kind of seeing each other's blind spots in it, right? Like we're seeing different angles so we can kind of help. Like, how do we handle this conflict with love? Right? How do we now each one of us has a different conflict. So let's bring the course into it. How do we use it? We use the
Maybe
course
this analogy is not maybe it's not a preferred analogy, but sometimes you can't smell your own BO, so you need somebody else to tell you.
Yeah. I feel like I'm more open, especially with y'all, maybe not with everybody for sure. Got some ego stuff to work on, but with y'all, I'm very open to like see y'all's angles in it because I know y'all are seeing something that I'm not seeing. And I want to resolve a problem with love because I know that that's going to feel the best. That's what we're here to do. And so like having us as a group of working all on the same book and actually seeing this text from different angles helps us apply it, differently too. So I
Very
think
nice.
if anybody's ever interested in the Course of Miracles, it's a good thing to do. You can do by yourself, but I really do love this. I mean, I'm all about accountability. I need it. I teach it to other people. So I think this helps us really stay accountable.
This helps with like allowing criticism too. I feel like you almost want to welcome it in because you want to
Yeah.
try so hard to change things.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. So who asked the last question?
I asked the ego one.
Okay, so you go next, Travis Ann?
Okay, let me pick which one.
Okay.
Okay, do we want a hard one or an easy one?
It don't matter. You do it.
It don't matter.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to
Okay,
keep it
I'm
easy
gonna
for
pick
the
what I think
viewers,
is a
but
harder
I'll
one.
go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, let's go down the rabbit hole. What do you hope happens as a result of you working through A Course in Miracles?
I get to go first and I go. I know. Which this would be ego because it's linear and it's in the future. I hope. Well, number one is that I really embody the state of love and people feel that off of me in any moment. And actually the people like my husband and my son feel that off of me more, that I really get to embody like Jesus, right? Like what Jesus was like doing, right? Without being crucified. And so I really want to embody that as much as possible. And what really first came to mind is that I get off this wheel of reincarnation.
We
um,
ain't coming back.
I'm good, right? I feel like too, because, and this is not just with the course, this was a realization, but the course it really hones in on this is that there is no death and there is no birth. That's the wheel of reincarnation. You were always joined with God in love. And so you have to embody that to get off this wheel of having to learn and be in a classroom. Um, and I believe that's what with Jesus's crucifixion, he got off the wheel. He embodied it. That's what I'm saying, minus the crucifixion. I feel like I've been crucified. So yeah, that's what I don't. There's very, this illusion of reality can be very magical and beautiful. It can have a really beautiful reflection, but I don't want it. I was not sure if I was I don't want to continue to do this. It just seems like there's a lot of suffering here. And so I'm ready whenever it's my time or whatever timeline I, go down. I'm ready for it to be me to be joined and have that embodiment of love. If hopefully this lifetime, if not shorter lifetimes to come.
Nice.
What about
So,
you, Richard?
oh, I just want to sound like Urquhart Tolle when I'm done.
Very slow talking. Yes.
No, right. No, just kidding. But yes, like what I want out of this, when I'm done is I hope that I have this inability to be triggered. Kids aren't pushing my buttons anymore. I can I work at a place where there can be a lot of drama. So just being able to deal with that in more peaceful ways consistently is what I feel is coming. And I already see bits and pieces of that happening. Like you were just saying too, when you're in a state, we must be radiating this energy that others just really can't counteract, I guess, maybe, because I've definitely some people have just been very happy. I don't feel like I'm doing anything extraordinary to make them that way. It's just that way. So self-empowerment is what I really want to get out of this. Um, is just this new profound awareness where I'm just not triggered all the time. And it doesn't even matter outside what's going on. I know reality can be difficult, but I just want to be able to perceive it with peace. It can just go on the way it is. I mean, I don't have a lot of drama in my life, even though I just had some yesterday. Went well. Thanks again. But if I can handle shit like that all the time, I'm in. We're already in. So yeah, I'm loving it, and I can kind of feel and see how this is changing me. So I'm just gonna stay on the wave.
I can feel just right now like an excitement and love in this like circle that you don't like. I don't feel that in other circles that aren't talking about this. But I can feel it here. There's something inside of me just that as we talk about love and wanting to embody it, that actually makes me embody it more and actually feel it more. I feel also that, and I'm sure y'all can attest to this, is like when you're embodying love, and that's what the course does, that's what it's like you get out of it. There are the dramas. Now, there might be some personal dramas. We all have it, but the external dramas that used to be a whole lot more just like don't come around because you're not that. Like, it's kind of like you hung around a group of friends and they were always gossiping all the time and you just had nothing to add to it but positive things. Eventually, they don't come to you anymore because you're not going to add into it. And I feel like that seems like I've seen that a little bit of a falling away from different people. Not that I don't love them, but it's like I just don't have anything to add, other than like the positive aspect, but that's not what some people want. So I'm
We
not
just don't
really,
like with entertainment anymore. That's all it is, right?
I agree. I agree. So what do you get wanting to get out of it, Travis Sam?
Um, Ultimately, more play and play embodiment. I can at times incorporate play into how I interact in the world. And I want more of that. I used to say that, in like stress management class or a breathwork class, I might say something like, my intention is that, no matter what the seas are doing, I want the deck of my ship to stay level. But I don't feel that way anymore. Now I feel like, okay, the waves come and we just surf. Like it's all play.
I like it.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Because it's all an illusion anyways, right? Because you're not taking it seriously.
That's
Like,
going with the flow.
yeah, like that's one thing that I've heard throughout the course is the problem is we took the tiny mad idea seriously. We take this so seriously,
Mhm.
and it does seem really serious. I mean, you turn on the news, it seems serious. But when you really have the
I heard someone talk oh, I'm sorry.
no,
I
go
didn't
ahead.
mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I heard someone talk about the difference between serious and sincere,
Mm.
and making that shift, even in my own mind, of thinking like, oh, this is very serious. I have started to shift and to think thoughts like, oh, this is a moment that calls for sincerity.
Ah,
Uh, yeah, that's way better to look at it.
uh-huh. It's so soft. It has the
Mhm.
empathy on it. Like you can still be empathetic. They talk about that all the time. That's about being normal in the course of miracles. If somebody's dying, you're like, it's just an illusion. Like that's not gonna work out, right? Like that's not what you tell people. So like, don't be
He's
weird.
not real anyway. It's fine.
Exactly. No, you don't want to do that. So it's not about that. It's about being sincere and empathetic to it, even though it is an illusion, you know?
Yeah.
Because it does feel
Mhm.
serious when things happen in this world because there's birth and death. We're all, getting out of here with death. That seems very, very heavy. So it's hard. I mean, we can say it's an illusion and stuff, but it's that's real hard to integrate. I see why people that like study not just the course, but this type of material and go off and become a monk and lose all the stuff, right? It's easier just to I'm just going to get rid of every connection I have, right? And I'm just going to stay in peace. It's harder to be here doing that, being in the regular world. Definitely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what's beautiful about A Course in Miracles is that it's giving us a way to relate with one another in love so that we don't have to be monks in the mountains and live by ourselves and not talk for 4 years or whatever.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I
big stuff.
really like whenever I first had my like aha epiphany moment, like I remember thinking to myself, oh shit, I wish I would have known this 20 years ago because I would have just been a monk. Like I would have just shaved my head and got rid of all, like I have too much stuff to like worry about what, like none of this stuff even matters, like all of this does not matter anymore. And I like
Mhm.
fantasized about it. And it's so different to like when I was in my 20s, all I wanted to do is like live the American dream. And then you wake up and you're like, oh, this is not giving me what I thought it was going to give me. I want to get rid of all of it. So I agree. The Course of Miracles really helps you integrate love in this crazy reality that we this crazy illusion. There was something that came up for me that this week that, with all the stuff that's going on and on the news and the war and Palestine and all that stuff, I haven't really like listened to a lot of the stories of it. I'm uneducated on everything. I've heard some of the really horrible stories. And I remember thinking to myself, like, God, it's so dark, I don't want to even look at it. Like it just makes just some of the little stories that I've heard. And I'm like, oh, there's some really dark stuff inside of me that I don't even want to look at. That's what I took from it. I was like, oh, I don't want to look at it because it's so scary to look at within myself, to see that.
I feel almost guilty trying to give other people's stories grace. Like those kind of stories is just so hard to give grace for. Like
Yeah.
it's not our reality, it's somebody else's reality playing out, and we get to see it, but it's not our reality. I don't necessarily think it's a reflection of our state. We can just look at it and kind of see how we feel about it and kind of know.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I almost feel guilty just giving that whole thing grace because it's just not my reality. If you choose that reality for yourself, then I give you grace for it.
Yeah.
Horrible, though. I'm not giving excuses to like the tragedies, but you know
Yeah. You're not saying that I've heard one person like good, bad, right, or wrong. You're not saying any of that. You're just giving grace to the state. That's what's happening, right? But,
right, right.
for most of us, we're ego driven. So it's a lot of revenge, and a lot of right and wrong.
Oh yeah. And you know what our reaction's supposed to be, in Course of Miracles is just love. Like I always think about like what Jesus did, what he actually did when he was being persecuted. He drug his own cross and nobody's doing that these days. Nobody's even going close to doing anything of that expression. So
Mhm. Yeah. Also, the Course of Miracles, and I don't know if I've heard it in the Course of Miracles or if I heard it in the Disappearance of the Universe, which if you're watching this, that is a majorly great book to read alongside the course because it will make it make sense. But it was that it was strange that people wear the basically the tomb of Jesus around their neck. Like they're literally honoring the sin, right? Like, and I was like, huh, I've never thought. And I have crosses all over my house. My mom used to put them over doorways, so I've always done that. And I was like, huh, I've never thought about it because I mean, he was literally killed on this cross, and we're like, he died for our sins, right? So we're just gonna wear it instead of looking at the resurrection, meaning he really wasn't a body. There was no sins. So that's the word we kind of look over that and we decide to wear the like, tombstone around our neck and represent, just shows us how much we like kind of embody sin, you know? And I was like, huh, I've never looked at it that way of how Christianity does that. It was interesting to me. Who was the last person that asked a question? I don't remember. Was it Travis Ann?
yes, yeah.
Yeah, it was me.
Okay, so let me think. Okay, my question is, do you actively engage in spiritual or meditation practice alongside studying the course? If so, how does this support your understanding and integration of the teaching? My ears ringing like crazy. So, you want to go first, Richard?
Yeah, I'll go. So for me, it's kind of like, yes, I do a meditation at least once every day. It's usually in my car before work. But I usually watch the video in my car. I'll do a meditation. But the meditation for me, it's kind of like practice makes perfect. You're just taking the ideas. You're really just trying to kind of keep them there, so that you're just not losing them so fast. So for me, that just kind of integrates it a little bit more. You did put out a Course of Miracles. There was a meditation for that. That's really good. I listen to that quite often, and I think it's like 15 minutes or 10 minutes or something.
Oh,
But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it kind of puts you in, and I feel like the meditation for me, it's almost like I'll go back to music theory. Like if you're gonna perform, you don't just run out there and play your instrument. You tune it, you play it a little bit, you try to get in tune with what you're going to do, and then you go out there and perform. So for me, it like gets me in tune. Um, just trying to incorporate all these ideas and really just sit with them and just really kind of keeps I feel like I'm in tune with reality when I do that.
Yeah, I like the way I love how you always bring in music theory. It does make it very understandable and how your brain kind of works on it, chews on it,
I'm
chews
not a
on
master of music theory, but I know enough to be dangerous.
it. So what about you, Travis?
So I've meditated for many years now. It's a regular part of my routine. Typically, I listen to a guided meditation as soon as I wake up. And that practice for me has benefited in lengthening that window before a natural reaction occurs, giving me a more equal opportunity to be more of response than of reaction. So the meditation for me is a practice of how can we lengthen that time between observation and reaction response, but then also how can we further expand observation abilities, whether that's visual observation abilities, audible hearing, other sensory abilities, even my own intuition. It's an opportunity for me to go under expansion. And with A Course in Miracles, it's giving me a different thought system to integrate into that expansion mechanism.
Yeah, I like all that you said. I think that meditation, like you said, Richard, it helps you like prime for the day,
Exactly.
because life will, I hate to say come at you, but there will just, that's just life is life, right? I told somebody this just about my coaching, but I think this is the course too, is that I can't help people with the ups and downs of life, but I can help them perceive it differently. And that's what changes everything. And so I think that's what the course does. And for meditation for me, now I used to meditate like religiously every single morning. But with the course, I I do different things. Sometimes I'll do a meditation first thing in the morning. Sometimes I'll just write on my hand what I'm big at writing on my hand what it is, that I'm supposed to be practicing that day, so I'll remember a lot. But I definitely think that, like last night, I listened to a meditation as I was falling asleep because I just feel like it's like constantly reprogramming. But it was, of course, it was the lesson that I was learning today. So it could kind of prime me for the next day to remember that lesson. So for me, my kind of practices is read it or listen to the actual lesson of the day, and then I'll listen to one or two people describe it on their own. Sometimes I'll do a meditation with it, and most of the time I write the lesson on my hand, so I'll remember to repeat it all the time, just because it when I have these like triggering thoughts. I was on a walk this morning and I would just have random triggering made up stories in my head that I was, and I would look down at my hand and I would repeat it to myself like, okay, this is what it does. Reprogram that, give it grace. So yeah, I think it helps. And I think meditation helps integrate any teaching in. And so I think that's only 4 questions so far that I've done, right? And so this would be the 5th question, I believe, that will go on. Wait, would this be 4? I'm sorry, how many questions
I'm not sure. I think I've asked 3.
okay, so now ask
Are we
4.
on Richard's question now?
Yeah, so this would be your 4th question,
Okay.
Richard.
Um, so I was gonna so for the viewers, how has the course like day to day for you guys? Do you feel you've been successful? Is it difficult? Is it easy? How do you feel like the course is from day to day? Like, is it difficult to do? Are they asking too much? Do you feel like you have to go back and do it again? Or, how do you feel about the course in itself and like how difficult it is to play it out for this year?
Okay, so I can start. If we think about this in terms of degrees of difficulty, in order to actually do the practice, the mechanism is simple. You read the paper, you do the thought exercise, and in terms of a time commitment, it's short. However, the ease, I can't say is really there in what I experienced while doing the course. So it's definitely been a roller coaster, and ease has not been the predominant experience.
Yeah,
I
I
would
agree.
say openness, curiosity, confusion, a sense of like adventuring. Those have been predominant themes or experiences for me. Um, there was definitely like a 5-day period where every single day I was thinking, what's the point of all this? What is the point of all this? What is the point of all this? What is the point of all this? Like it got me very existential. And then one day that was over. Maybe it'll come back again. I don't know exactly how the cycle will be for me, but ease has not been the predominant theme. It's definitely been more of like, okay, this is an adventure. I don't know what's around the corner, and I'm willing to be okay with that, at least for 5 seconds, and then we'll see what the next breath has to hold.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. I like that. I mean,
Yeah.
you just, yeah, I just want to get a feeling for like what people are going through when they're actually going through the course, you know?
Yeah, I could say that if you're if I'm thinking about, like you said, if we're just like, okay, you read it, you listen to it, and you can meditate on it. I think I have tried to do the course several times, but not fully out until now, where I'm actually like trying to dig deep. Now I'm talking about the workbook. When it comes to the actual book of the Course of Miracles, I don't think it's the easiest text to understand and read. It reads like the Bible. That's why I highly recommend getting The Disappearance of the Universe and following that trilogy, because for some reason, after reading that book twice, then I start to read the course and I was like, oh, it all made sense. So I think most people that are beginning are going to find it as a hard read for sure. Because I did. Um, like Travis Ann said, but the exercises of doing them every day, that's kind of easy. But I definitely think, I don't know if it's the course or if it's just life. My mom told me this, that a lot of people that do the course want to get the book and throw it at the wall. And there have been several times where I've been like, fuck this book, because I almost feel like, oh my God, this shit is like coming in full stream and now I got to integrate it. And so I don't know if that's what comes along with the course. I don't know if that's just life. Um, but I would agree with Travis saying it's not easy to integrate this. It's not easy to understand it at first. That's why it says you need to be a dedicated student. And so you have to kind of go in going, okay, I'm going to try to figure out what the goal in this is. And for me, it was I knew that this is what I was missing. And that's why I went to it. So yeah, I don't feel like it's hard, but I also don't feel like it's easy, because you're about to integrate some stuff into your life. Things are going to come up.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Like, I don't think it's easy. It's easy. It's not real difficult to understand, but it's not easy to integrate because you know, you basically have to admit to mistakes and things you've done that, you know, you have to let go of and just be humble about.
Do
But
you
yeah, I
think
mean,
it pulls up? I feel like it started to pull up those really dark places for me. And I don't know if that's just like me and the stage of the game that I'm in, but there were some really dark things. And, who knows? I'm only 70 days in, still got a whole lot to go. But that reflection that was happening for me was, yeah, it was testing me for sure.
yeah. So like, I don't know if most people would think that they can just read something and become a better person when there's actually a lot of work and integration involved. So it's not easy for me. There's days I feel like I want to do the lessons over again because I just don't feel like they're integrated enough. So I don't know if I'm doing it right or wrong at that point, but it's just how I feel. So I feel like whatever I feel is good enough.
Oh
But
yeah, I heard you don't have to be a perfect student, and don't
yeah,
try to be a perfect student. So I'm like, I kind of lean on that a lot, because today's lesson, I think this would be 3 days of this lesson, just because I haven't done like the perfect student. I'm like, I'm not doing it as much as I really want to integrate that in. So I don't think, yeah, some days you'll do it for 3 days, but I
no.
just need to get back.
Now you guys read the book, right? Or you listen
I
to maybe
listen.
both? Yeah, okay. So I listened to because I bought my mother the book. She couldn't read it. She's one of those people that threw it out the door, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so I would say to people out there, like if you can, if it is a difficult read for you, this group like that we have is awesome to have for this. Listening to the videos on there as they kind of elaborate on it really does help a lot for me. What's I forget his name, awesome, awesome sauce or something. I forget, I forget Hoff. I forget his name. Anyway,
Dave Hoffman,
Dave,
something.
yeah, Dave, yeah, he's really good at explaining it,
Yeah,
nice and calm. But yeah, for me, trying to incorporate the lessons all the time during the day is kind of difficult for me. So if I don't feel like I've incorporated or integrated something enough, I'll do the day over again.
yeah,
So I think I'm on 59 or 60 right now. I'm gonna probably do 60 tomorrow.
yeah. And as the course goes on, just because I'm on 70, um, the time is to dedicate to it is longer. So at first it's bite size, then you got to take it because like on 70 so far and up, it says you devote 10 to 15 minutes on like meditating on the concept twice a day. So you're asked to do more. And I believe that's how it goes as you go further and further because you're integrating it more. So yeah, at first I like that about the textbook though, is that you slowly like build up on it.
Yeah, it's not overbearing at first. They just definitely ease you into it, which is nice. Yeah,
Yeah. So the next question is for you, Travis Ann. Do you like how I said that so beautifully?
Yes. How often do you think about A Course in Miracles since starting it?
Daily.
all the time.
I'm constantly doing that concept, right? Like I'm constantly like if there's any I'm really seeing what it brought up is a lot of like little bitty hidden judgments everywhere. And so that turnaround for me is always like, oh, there it goes again. Like there goes that judgment again. It can be the small, I mean, it literally can be the smallest little like memory of something that I'm like, why does this person do that? And then I use the course of like forgiveness, love, forgiveness on those little bitty things. So it will be easier. So yeah, I think about it quite often throughout the day. I mean, yeah.
I would probably think about it even more often if I could allow myself to talk the crazy to all these people on the daily, right? But I have to, I withdraw myself a little bit, and then I find myself not so much in tone with it. But I think about it all the time. It's and then if I'm not thinking about it like for integrating something, I'm thinking about, am I gonna miss, or oh my God, it's been too long since I've done this, or so I start getting worried. But yeah, it's always on my mind. And I couldn't tell you like when it started that way. I mean, in the beginning, I don't think it was like that, but I was very excited to start this program. I'll admit that. When you guys brought it up, when Jacqueline brought it up, I was like, yeah, I'm in. I'm all in. So no, all the time. And I try not to like bring it up all the time. People, it's like being a Bible thumper. I'm not going to talk about the Bible all the time.
I'm like, the course says, well, what I heard in the course, and I'm like, God, Jacqueline, I'm sure people are like, oh, because my mom would say the same thing. Well, the course says, I'm like, oh, okay, mom. But then you start doing the course, and you're like, well, the course says.
It's so true. I am now your mom. I am now the person that goes around saying A Course says all the time. I told my lash tech about it. She was fascinated. Like everyone gets an earful about what is A Course in Miracles and what is reality, and what's the new thing that like has changed my mind on what is actually happening. Like everyone gets an earful, and I have to say, most people want to hear more.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice.
I agree. Like
I
I
don't
do
think
definitely
I
think
like
people
this.
are listening when I mean I don't get a sense that people aren't listening to me most of the time, but I think it's me more judging myself of saying, oh, the course says. But yeah, I think people are always kind of intrigued because I think because we embody it, right? You embody it more. So whatever the hell you're embodying and whatever the hell you're talking about, they're like, okay, what are they doing? I want more of that. Or I feel something off of them, you know?
I'm just picturing my
Mhm.
colleagues, and they're all just rolling their eyes every time I open my mouth. Oh, Rich, with your spiritual shit.
I wonder. I don't know. I think I don't know if people do that, but I also don't live in Detroit. I live in Austin, so a lot of people.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. We are, you live in a spiritual oasis and I live in a spiritual desert.
Yeah, exactly.
I also live in spiritual delusion where I believe that every ear wants to hear me. So
That's a great belief to have.
when I experience that they're listening, I think that that's my belief coming true.
I agree.
Well, I'll believe it for you.
Yeah. I don't I
Thank
try
you.
I go in between this because the mind can be like, I'm important, my individual self, right, is important. So sometimes and I remember this at the beginning of my journey thinking like, why are we around each other? Like, there's some reason, nothing is a coincidence. But I do really think that like I'm here to plant a seed in some sort of way, but I try to not get into the me. I'm here to plant the seed because I'm better than anybody else, right? Because that ego, that spiritual ego but more of like, okay, I know that if I let love talk through me, that it's gonna hit people's heartstrings and that seed will be planted, but I don't know when it will develop, right? So so I get that. I get that too. Like, oh, and then how do you like they say the course, Jesus in the course meets you where you're at. And so I kind of think about like how do I meet people where they're at? Because most people aren't, I don't want to say most people, I'm sure there's, thousands of people that are on the same wavelength as us, but not the people that we may encounter every single day at like Richard's work or, people that I do nails on, or they're just not thinking on the same. So how do I kind of integrate my love where they can hear it, right? So I'm
The way
in,
I see that is in that third step that we talk about in sharing the news
yeah.
and sharing the news in our experience of, hey, me myself had this experience. And then in that sharing the news, another person who thinks they're a self can relate to that experience. And you have now propagated that web of information through the concept that there is a self at all.
Mhm. I agree. I agree. Okay, so last but not least, let me see. I have a lot of questions. Okay, so here's a good one. How do you view the relationship between A Course of Miracles and other spiritual texts?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
How do you view the relationship between A Course of Miracles and other spiritual texts? So, in other words, like, how is the Course of Miracles different than other spiritual concepts that you have heard?
Well, I'm not well versed in other concepts or religious views, but I'll just take a stab at it and say that it really emphasizes what, and it even aligns with like quantum physics. Like, it really emphasizes being in the now, as there is really no time. Things like that. Like a lot of a lot of metaphysical things, I feel like are coming through that align with a lot of science that we're still discovering that's not in a lot of other stuff. And it does help me relate to these concepts, the logic of these concepts a little easier. We have something that we already kind of know of, like within science or quantum physics. But just aligning these two things, um, when something like that aligns, it's hard to refute it. So I guess that's why I don't really have a lot of knowledge about a lot of other views of or religious concepts, if you will, because they just, I mean, I didn't really, nothing really felt logical to me. In this love, I see it as pure logic, and I know that when people talk about love in general, that it's so dynamic. You really, it's almost impossible to define. But love is just, it's just acceptance. It's all it really is, accepting it for people of their own unique desires. So, so did I answer the question?
Sounds good to me. Sounded great. So what do you think, Travis?
So for me, the nuance is in who created this reality. And a lot of Christianity, for example, that's what I'm most familiar with, will teach you that God created this reality. But A Course in Miracles teaches that we co-created this reality in the mind. And that distinction is a subtle nuance between, and that kind of separates A Course in Miracles from other religious constructs, is in who or what created this reality.
Yeah, I agree. The Course of Miracles, what is so okay, so what first concept came to mind is like, if we're talking about woo-woo spirituality, like number one thing that comes to mind, like beginners, is like the secret and the law of attraction, right? And so I feel, and I teach people, I literally teach people about creating reality and opening your mind to, you know, a different identity for your life. But I'm leading them from where they are to try to get them ultimately to realize that their identity is love, right? But you got to meet them where they are. And so for me, the law of attraction focuses a lot on self, you being a body and a self in a world, and you doing certain things to boost up this individual self. And I have myself in this journey got lost in that, and got lost in like what my why was. And because originally when I had, you know, an epiphany moment, it just like made sense. This was all about love and spreading love and having, you know, ripple effects, and nobody really understood like this fear wasn't true and all this stuff, right? But then you get into the concept of self again, the ego will come right back on and attach. And I feel like the Course of Miracles, how this is different is it tells you there is no self. You know, there is no self, there is no world. It is all an illusion, that you are ultimately always with God. And the ego, the mad idea, makes you perceive that you're in this individual world with an individual self that you're a victim of. And so I think that that is way different than a lot of texts I've come across. It's quite the opposite. It's about boosting the individual self in the world that you live in. And this is completely, there is no world. There is no world, but you may perceive that you are in a world. And as you perceive that you are in this illusion of a world, how do you live with love? Because you want to connect to that mind frame of love, right? And that's what burst you out of this physical reality. And so I think that's quite different than anything I've come across. And but I'm like you, Richard. I haven't studied a ton of other religious stuff. I've dabbled. I like to dabble in stuff, just kind of get the
I
concept.
hear things.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of things. I've watched a lot of documentaries, stuff like that. But I do think that all of it is leading. They're all pointing to the same thing.
Yeah, I think they originally were too. You know, if you go back further, I'll just guess and speculate that they were probably much more accurate, you know, and just got worse over time. And plus, the day that we live in, this victim mentality state we live in, they're not going to interpret anything correctly anyway. If you're in that state, right? How do you? Is it? I just don't see the chances of interpreting that correctly if you're just not in that mindset.
I agree. I agree. So do you go back to you? Because this would be question number 5, right? We did 4 and this would be 5. So
Oh, yeah. Do I have another one here? So I don't know if I have. What is from the Course of Miracles? This might be something similar. What one of the biggest ideas or concepts you've adopted that foreign people, you know, what most people wouldn't realize or use, like like living in the now or something like that. Is there like a concept that you've learned from this that you didn't have before? For
For
me,
me, it actually goes back to what I was saying in that last question, in that concept that what reality is a co-created experience in the mind. And if all of what I am experiencing is a reflection of me, and I can choose to experience it in a vibration of my choosing, then I want to choose that everything that I'm experiencing, its intention comes from love. So if someone gives me some interaction, whether I prefer it or not, I'm now seeing it as an opportunity to see it as a loving message, whether I like the container or not. Like
Yeah.
if this, I try to see them as me, and it is me sending me this message, and how might I hear it in my most loving translation of what I'm experiencing.
I like that.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
that helps me to see people as innocent because they're not themselves, they're only me.
Right, right. And that's, yeah, I feel like that's where I give people more grace too.
I think a concept that I've been chewing on and they talk about in the course is everything's already happened. You know, like we were talking, we're just watching it on a projection screen. And so what we do is everything's already happened. It's already over. They said it all happened in an instant and it was over and the correction was already made. And so we're just reviewing these tapes. That was a really cool concept to look at. And what you do while you're reviewing it is I don't know why I sit on the fence with the decision maker in the viewing of life and reality. I'm sitting on this fence and I get to choose, do I want to perceive it, view it with love, or do I want to view it with fear? And so that's all what comes together for me is it's like a TV screen and I'm just watching it. And then here I am with Jesus sitting in there. And which way am I going to perceive it? And it makes it so simple for me. Like, okay, everything comes up. Here's a conflict. Which way are you going to go? How are you going to integrate it right now with love? How are you going to stay in peace right now? How do you do that? So that all comes together to me as really understandable and easy. I like the 1, 2, 3. Let's break it down. Okay, I'm here, conflict. How am I going to do this next step? Right? How am I going to do everything with it? How am I going to be Jesus? What would Jesus do? I already watch feet for a living, so I'm one step closer.
That's funny.
Yes.
Well, for me, it just kind of goes back to like, I didn't have a profound understanding of living in the now like I did prior. Like to me, I think telling people out there that really try to understand what living in the now truly means. You can go so far with just that simple concept is, as non-simple as it can be. But, just, understanding that, what your emotions are, um, understanding that, when you got these stories playing out, are they from the past? And like you said, like Travis Dan said yesterday, it was made a really awesome point about, when you're speaking from the past, you could be basically allowing other people to, think that you're making assertions. It kind of is an assertion, but when you're not in the moment, you're giving people a lot of stuff to chew on. And that's something that I feel like if you can really learn to stay in that now moment with the concepts of just keeping the stories out and just expressing from the now, you can really avoid a lot of just just unnecessary negativity. 'Cause a lot of us will do it unknowingly. I do it unknowingly, but it's the integration, right? So just try to stay in the now, try the best I can to just try to stay in that state. But that's the biggest concept for me is just learning that one for me.
And do you have the last question, Travis?
I do. How has A Course in Miracles impacted your most intimate or closest relationships?
This will be easy for me.
Go, then you go first.
Well, um, as you all know, you all helped me through a problem yesterday. So I had a very unfortunate text, and it was concerning that had something to do with my kids, my wife. I had no idea what it was about. It was just an anonymous text. So, your mind can go anywhere with that, right? Like there's so much unknown. But you guys helped me out. I kind of drafted a text for her that was very, like very empathetic. I'm giving her the green light to make all the decisions, speaking from the now, not giving her anything to chew on or making any assertions. And it went very well. I was so nervous about even sending the text. I didn't even send it yesterday. So I sent it today, and I could tell she was frustrated, which she should be, but I was very surprised at the end of the outcome when we were done talking. So I was just very grateful for staying in the moment.
Yes, I think that for me in my intimate relationships, it's helped me to really see everything in a loving way. Now, I'm not there have been several times where I've sat on that fence with the Holy Spirit or Jesus or whoever you want to call it and dived right back into that ego and knowingly did it, like saw myself completely doing it. But I feel like I'm more likely to choose to react in love because of the constant integration. Yeah.
Nice.
How about yourself?
For me, yeah, for me, I am more willing to share and more willing to be present, maybe even more capable, but definitely more willing to be present and not disassociated um, when in the proximity of others. So it definitely has increased connection um, and even helped ease my own perception of what's when it's safe for me to express or share.
Hmm.
Well, that was like a perfect question to end this little first for beginners and what you get for beginners with the Course of Miracles. So I love that question. Thank you, Travis Ann.
Yep.
And I'm going to, in the description below, I will have both me and Travis Ann's, not yours, Richard, because yours isn't out there, information to connect with us if you have any more questions and you're trying to like dive deep into the Course of Miracles. So we'll have that all below. And I just want to thank all of y'all for doing this with me. And we'll have more because we have a lot more days, I'm sure, to kind of see what happens and what unfolds. So
Nice.
thank you. Thank y'all so much for doing
That's
this.
awesome. Yeah, my favorite co-creators.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank y'all.
I appreciate it. I
Thank
will
you.
talk to y'all on the Marco. Holler. Bye.